Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Monday, June 13th. Under item 1, call to order 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Dockler. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mock. Kwame.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Veen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. Under item 2, discussion items, 2.1, application for Class 2 off-sale alcoholic beverage license from STL of North Dakota DBA Target Wine and Spirits, located at 3601 32nd Avenue South. Ms. Lombard, good evening.
President Sandy, members of City Council, we have received an application from Target. They want to add an off-sale to their store here in Grand Forks. Police department's completed the background checks, and they're working with other city departments as the construction moves on. So looking for your review and approval this evening, subject to final sign-off by all city departments and payment of fees.
Any comments or questions? Target? Just like Walmart, I assume, similar to what Walmart has their
Yep, I believe it's going to be, there are representatives here if you wanted details. My understanding is it's going to be near the west entrance. You'll come in, and then where the little restaurant area used to be is where the off-sale is going to be.
Got it. But it's a separate,
Separate entrance.
Yep, there you go. Okay. Is there a comment?
According to our policy, yes. I'll move approval.
Moved by Weber. Is there a second? By Kwame. Thank you. Any other comments? Without further ado, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.2, application for Class 1 on and off sale alcoholic beverage license from Libra Associates LLC, DBA Libra Bar and Nightclub, located at 3450 Gateway Drive. Ms. Lombard.
Yeah, Mr. Sandy, member of City Council, this application from Libra Associates LLC. The owners of that corporation also own the West Africa Cuisine that's been located in Columbia Mall for a while now. Looking to expand into this new space and have a Class 1 alcohol license. The location is in the part that used to be the Ho Bar and Casino, located out in the former historical Westward Ho building. There is, I will point out on the staff report, our application only allows a space for 3 people to list their ownership percentages. So page 7 of your packet was the 4th individual that has a 10% ownership that was included in there. I think I was going to annotate that Friday and I missed that. So you realized that they were another 10% owner. So there are individuals here representing the corporation if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, looking for approval again, subject to final sign-off by all city departments and payment of fees.
Any comments, questions? Moved by Kavami. Is there a second? Second by Veen. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.3, special event, Hugo's Concert Series, July 9, 2022.
President Sandy, members of the committee, the event that I'm bringing forward has already been heard once. The event was scheduled to be on the Greenway, and this has had to be changed primarily because of all of our water, and the ground has become very soft, and we don't want to damage the Greenway. So we have been able to work with the event organizers, and they are going to move it to the Columbia Mall parking lot, the former Sears location, and you see in your packet there is a permission letter, and everything is moved forward to do this, but we just would like to have your approval to make sure you know that it had moved.
Thanks, Ms. Simeoni. Yes,
Move approval.
moved by Weber. Is there a second? Second by Dockler. Ms. Simeoni, I do have a question for you. Do we know what hours they're going to be having the concert?
You know what they do? I don't know if I have it right here in
I
front of
don't
me, but I know
recall
that
I don't recall that it was going that late at night.
11.
Yeah, I
believe
just
it's-
know that that parking lot does back up to some residential homes, so I think we need to make sure, in a perfect world, in my opinion, they would put it on the other side, like in front of Macy's. And so that's just food for thought. Otherwise, I think they need to make sure to let the local residents know that that's,
And that's typically something we do, and I will make sure that that's
I
implemented.
mean, it's not that people don't live downtown, for example. There are, it's just different, right? And so typically, I believe the people that live in those condos over there are older as well, so.
Exactly. The amount of people who can, or the attendees, has been capped at 5,000, but 5,000 is still a lot.
And it's just loud music, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so, okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion
you.
carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.4, award bids for project number 2022-8, 9, and 10. Ms. Lipsch, good afternoon.
Good evening, President Sandy, committee members. We bid sanitation trucks again this will be the third time we're bidding them. As you recall, I asked you to throw the bids out for 2021, and we rebid those with the 2022 bids. You can see I did include a bid history just to give you an understanding of where numbers came in. You can see we did do 2022 bid number 1 earlier this year, and bids came in really high. So we met with vendors and changed our specifications a little bit. Went with different chassis that we can probably actually get. I did receive a call. We opened the bids on Tuesday. I got a call from Northland Truck Sales. They were late, knew they were going to be late for the bid opening. They got stuck in construction zone between here and Fargo. So my first request to you is to allow us to open that bid. It is the only bid that we would have received for the front load trucks.
So any questions about that? Do we need to have that motion in a second to open that bid? Does anyone think? Mr. Veen?
This was the only one that you have the potential for.
Yeah, otherwise we have no bids for front load trucks.
I'd move we work with the irregularity and open up the bid.
Great, there's a motion by Veen, second by Kavami. Any comments on that issue? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
The bid has been in Sherry's possession ever since the bid opening. He was like, 10 minutes late, I believe.
Yeah, so we'll publicly open that and read it just so that everybody knows. Nothing fishy going on. We've got the one bid then from Northland Truck Sales for 2022-8, and they're looking at a Peterbilt 520, New Way Mammoth, and their price is $296,987. So with that, I will turn that over to you.
All right, thank you. So what I'm looking for now is a bid to approve, a motion to approve the bids from Sanitation Products. Those would be for 2 side load curb tenders, total cost $614,400. We would not be accepting their trade values. We will sell those trucks on Gov Deals. There's a great demand right now for sanitation trucks, and we feel the $10,000 is really under what we could get for them on Gov Deals. So when these trucks come in, then we will turn around and sell them on Gov Deals. The other bid acceptance I would like is for the 2 side load refuse trucks. Those are the Libra trucks. Those are a total of $652,186. And then this bid for the front load truck at $296,987. The side load trucks are probably not going to be received until 2023, mid-2023 probably. The front load is already made. It's something that they had on order and meets most of our specifications.
Comments?
So if,
Mr. Weber?
I'm
Yes,
sorry,
sir. Yep.
President Sandy.
Sir.
If those haven't been made yet, do we pay for them this year? Or is this something that can be included in the 2023 budget?
Right, yeah, we will reserve that money from the 2021, 2022, if they're not here by 2023.
And I realize you just opened one of the bids, so you don't have a total amount for us yet, but
So I think in the staff report, I kind of laid out, in 2021, the budgeted funds were $822,354. In 2022, budgeted $600,000. So we're looking at cash reserves of somewhere around $150 that we'll have to purchase these 5 sanitation trucks.
Yes, Mr. Veen?
I think it's probably very fortunate that you actually have a truck that's available. I mean, normally, everything you've looked at today is on order and you don't know when you will get it. So with that, I'd move approval of your recommendation.
Moved by Veen, second by Kavami. Any other comments?
One last question.
Yes,
if I may.
certainly.
So the amount we're taking from reserves, and then you're going to sell the current inventory, do we have some sense of how those two might line up?
So when we receive the trucks, sorry, Councilman Weber, when we receive those trucks, we will shortly thereafter put them on gov deals, so that revenue would be realized in 2023 more than likely. We are going to be also selling some surplus equipment in 2022. You'll probably see me at the next COW meeting for a list of surplus equipment out of sanitation and streets. So we could use some of that revenue as well.
I'm ready to vote. Thanks.
Excellent. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 2.5, appointments, reappointments to various committees for Historic Preservation Commission, Growth Fund, Board of Appeals, Board of Adjustments, and reappointment to Mechanical Board. Anybody have any comments or questions or concerns related to the appointees? Is there a motion moved by Veen to approve all appointees? Is there a second? Second by Weber. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 2.6, set public hearing for moving permit to relocate a storage building from 320 University Avenue to 2001 Dyke Avenue. Good evening.
Yes, President Sandy and council members, I am presenting the item for the moving permit. We haven't had a moving permit for quite a while. Whenever an existing structure has to be moved into the city of Grand Forks, we go through a formal process with a public hearing. You're probably familiar with this structure. It's very close. It's the 4-car stall garage right down the street.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Any comments or questions or concerns or thoughts, or is there a motion? Moved by Kavami, second by Weber. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Award bid for project 8530, Police Department HVAC repairs.
President Sandy,
Mr. Bozeman.
members of the committee, this is virtually the same when I was here about a month ago when we went through City Hall HVAC projects. The same process, we went through building assessments and all the general fund buildings, identified that HVAC was priority in both City Hall and the PD. And then what we did from there is basically prioritize those HVAC projects. This is the priority number one over at the police department. We opened bids a couple weeks ago. As you can see in my staff report, I was pretty intrigued that they came back high, had EAPC as well as inspections department staff do basically due diligence, dig into it to see if the actual numbers were fair and adequate. They are in line, competitive. So I'm recommending awarding a bid to Dakota Metal Fabrication, the amount of $898,000, and then a base bid for alternate number one, which is the removal of abandoned rooftop units for $4,975 for a total award of $902,975. And again, the majority of these funds are actually coming from ARPA funds for the HVAC units at the PD.
Is there any comments or questions? Mr. Weber?
If it's in the staff report, I apologize, but how old is the current unit? Old, like
40 years?
Yeah, since the building was built. I was actually going back and forth with our mechanical engineer that's working on it from EAPC yesterday, and I asked that same question, and his assumption was he thought 30 years, but it's tough to find some of those documents, but they're old, antiquated, and they're costing us, they're nickel and diming us, and over time they're going to cost more. We did look, do we need to pull this back, rebid at a different time? It's just, you'll see in my special notes that I left in there, once the bid is awarded, it's 25 to 35 weeks out just for the air handlers themselves, so the prices are just going to continue to go up.
We got our money's worth, and it's not going to get any cheaper.
I don't believe so.
Yep.
Great. Any other comments? None?
Let's move approval. Oh,
Motion by Weber, Is there a second? Second by Kavami, and a comment, Mr. Kavami?
Just one question. What was the estimate? I didn't see it in the report.
The estimate for the total, is that what you're asking for?
Yeah.
So the total, the base bid from the low bid from Dakota Metal Fabrication was $898,000. And then we also put a alternate on there for removal of 2 rooftop units that have been stagnant, sitting there for several years. And that came in at $4,975 for a total of $902,975.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
just curious.
the estimate
Yeah,
itself?
yeah.
We estimated when we started doing the work, we estimated anywhere between that $600,000 and $800,000. And that's why we went, hey, wait, these might be too high. But as they went through and talked to different vendors, they're right in line where they
Yeah,
should.
that's just curious. Yeah.
HVAC is not cheap. Yeah. Any other comments? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.8, plans and specs for Project 8410, TK Industrial Park Paving and Streetlights. Mr. Lieberman, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, committee members. This is the second public infrastructure project to support the TK Industrial Park development in our just south of Demers and west of the interstate. The first project was the public improvements of water, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer. This project is the privately funded paving and streetlights. The developer has hired Widseth to develop the plans and specifications. Our staff reviewed those plans and specs, and we find them adequate. We are still working out a couple minor details, but at this point in time, we recommend the council approve plans and specifications.
Any comments? Mr. Lieberman, when we put items like this out for bid for concrete work or whatever sort of work, what sort of stipulations do we put on the bids? For example, do we ask those bidding for specific qualifications for their employees? Do we ask, for example, do we require them to provide their drug testing policies, things like that?
In this specific example, President Sandy, the contractor or the developer is putting this out for bid. It's a private contract, so that would be his requirement for the bidding process. But more in general, as long as a contractor is a qualified vendor or qualified contractor, we generally award to lowest price qualified.
Sure. Interesting.
Yeah, if there were some unique requirements, an example being the recent Beacon water main relocation, we stipulated that they have to have asbestos qualified personnel because we knew the existing pipe was asbestos cement pipe. So in that case, we did stipulate specific qualifications, but that's really pretty unique.
Mr. Costa, is there, if, for example, we're paving out here on 4th, and that's a city project, if somebody, for example, one of the workers is high on meth or something on that order and operates a piece of equipment and hurts somebody else, does the city have any liability in that?
I can't say that they won't be named as a defendant, but the responsibility is going to be on the contractor ultimately, and we would turn that over. We probably have some insurance requirements that they have us as an additional insured under their contract. So what usually would happen under those set of circumstances is if we got named, we'd tender the defense to the contractor to defend the city, and they'd be generally obligated under the policy and under the terms of the contract as well.
I've been hearing anecdotal stories across the country of people doing bad things and cities getting sued. And so I'm just generally contemplating maybe we should have an actual policy where we want to see drug testing policies for our contractors.
And there may be, with respect to certain federal contracts, those type of requirements may already be embedded within those federal contracts as well. So it's probably not such a bad idea to at least start considering those type of elements.
Great. Just, sounds good. Just something for future. Yes, Mr. Weber?
Wouldn't these contractors always be bonded?
They would, correct.
Isn't that set up to cover the kinds of contingencies you're considering?
I'm as much concerned about the people that work and do these jobs, right? I think if the contractors actually have a good drug testing policy, I think that would, and they're following it, I think there aren't any problems then, are there? Right? So I think ultimately, I just want to make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing and everybody's safe.
The bond doesn't deal with liability exposure. The bond deals with performance under the terms of the contract. So it's a little different what you're covering with the bond versus a liability insurance policy.
Again, I'm not expecting to solve anything today. It's just something that came to mind.
It's an important policy discussion, isn't it? And a contractor could be hired, they could be bonded, they could have insurance, but by the time they're doing the work, things could go south, and would that change our situation?
No, what I'm saying is you made mention of a bond. Bonds usually with respect to performance, not the liability from an act that might occur through the performance of their work by an employee of the contractor. So what Mr. Sandy is referencing is the liability exposure if somebody gets hurt because somebody is on drugs or even if they're not. I mean, what's our exposure if somebody gets hurt? I'm walking from my office going across and I get hit by whatever it is out there, and I'm a plaintiff. What's the city's exposure under those types of set of circumstances?
Just, again, something that our city attorney perhaps should take a look at.
In his spare time?
Yes, I'm not trying to make policy tonight. I'm just lamenting that we might have issues. I'm not sure. So regarding TK, is there a motion and a second to move this forward? Moved by Kavami. Is there a second by Veen? Thank you, Mr. Veen. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. 2.9, bid award for project 8510, City Hall parking lot expansion. Mr. Libra.
Thank you. This is the expansion of City Hall Parking Lot C, which is just diagonal to City Hall. Back on May 2nd, the council approved plans and specifications and directed it to be bid. Last week, we held the bid opening. There were 4 bids received. All were accepted. The low bid was just a little bit under $238,000 by Op Construction. This bid's approximately 9.9% under the engineer's estimate, so we're very pleased to see that. With that, we are recommending award to the low bidder, Op Construction.
Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. So I'm going to go right back for 1 second, if you spare me a moment. Of course, here's a construction project that's being paid for by the city that's actually on city property. And so, again, this is the sort of thing where I don't know what Op Construction's drug testing policy is, for example. I don't know what any of their policies are. Just morbidly curious if we shouldn't be thinking about what policies do they have in place to make sure that the city's interests are covered. That is all.
Yeah, and again, I think the terms of our contract and that insurance policy, we should be additional insured under the policy by the contractor if they're doing work for us so that we've got that coverage, right? Sure. We've got coverage through the insurance reserve fund as well for that type of exposure. But if somebody would happen to get hurt in this particular project, again, dependent upon what the terms of the contract read, we get sued. We are going to tender that defense to the contractor and the contractor's insurance carrier to defend the city under the terms of the contract.
Great. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Weber.
And this is not about Op Construction or any of the contractors?
This isn't about anyone at all. Yes.
But Really, is Mr. Sandy the first one to consider this? This hasn't been dealt with in state code or even federal law previously?
No, I think I think people look at it from the standpoint of the terms of the contract, and we've got a liability insurance policy that the contractor has to provide to the city for that type of work. And so I've had experience with the city where there's been somebody hurt on city property, and because we've got an insurance policy, we tendered that defense, which means whoever really is the ultimate, whoever's got that insurance policy has to defend the city. It's not our cost, it's not our expense. We monitor it, but they have to take care of the liability defense, and if there's exposure, their policy covers our exposure.
No policy can dictate who people can name or not name in a case like that.
Yeah, we're going to get, because we own the property.
Deep pockets.
You're going to get named as,
Right.
more likely, you're going to get named as a defendant. Doesn't mean you have liability exposure. It doesn't mean you have to defend either. Somebody else might have to do that for you. But I'm not suggesting what Mr. Sandy is suggesting is a good policy to require contractors to have those things in place, to prove it to us as to what they've got in place so we can make those type of decisions.
Thank you.
President Sandy,
Yes, sir.
as a minor point of addition, our standard special provision language does require contractors to provide that liability insurance. I forget the coverage amount. I want to say it's $1 million or $2 million, but
Sure.
that is standard language in our standard provision.
Great.
And is that million per person or per incident, do you know?
I'd have to check the details for you, but it's generally, it is provided for across the board on all contracts, construction contracts that engineering puts together.
I'm glad that we have that, although I'm guessing that policy was set up at a time when $1 million different than maybe it is today.
Mr. Gosted?
You also have to be mindful that there are a tort cap under North Dakota law that's probably going to be applicable. It used to be $250,000 per person and $1 million per occurrence.
Oh, okay.
I think that's now it got raised in the last session. It's going to go up a little bit over the next several years. But there is a tort cap, and most of those type of claims are going to be subject to that tort cap application, so.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other?
Let's just keep talking about
Sorry,
this all
I
night.
took us sideways on insurance and drug testing. My apologies. Anybody want to award this contract? Mr. Kavami moves approval, second by Bean. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Weber dissents. Item 210, bid award for Project 8194 El Monte Force Main Reliever. Good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the council. This project is reusing the existing raw water line from near Lincoln Drive to Minnesota Drive with new valve sanitary force main pipe for to provide an emergency bypass for their sanitary sewer system. We held a bid opening last Thursday. It was above engineer's estimate, but below budget. So we ask that you award the bid to United Crane for the amount of $511,805.
Great. It's expensive, but this is going to provide great backup for us in the future if we
Yep.
have any issues with the force main, so.
I'll move approval.
Moved by Weber. Is there a second? Second by Kavani. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 211, bid award for Project 8217 Sanitary Lift Station Number 48 and Force Main. Severson, good evening.
So this project is for the new lift station in Forest Main south of 62nd Avenue between Washington and Columbia that will serve the Grand Valley development and future developments in this section of land. We held a bid opening last Thursday. We received 9 bids total. One bid did not have the current contractor's license. No bids were received for Schedule A. We received 3 bids for Schedule B and 4 for Schedule C. One bid for Schedule C did not have a notarized non-collusion affidavit. And engineering has been phasing out that requirement, so we ask that we waive that bid irregularity, and then we can continue on to see if that low bid was lower than what we have. So with that, staff recommends to award the low bid as follows for Schedule B. General work to ICS, mechanical work to McFarland, and electrical work to RBV Electric and to waive that bid irregularity for Schedule C to complete the bidding process, and we'll come back with those results on Monday, June 20th.
Any comments or questions? Were there multiple other bidders for Schedule C?
So there was 4, and we opened 3 of the 4. So we asked to open that one remaining bid.
And why was it irregular again?
Because the non-collusion affidavit was not notarized.
Oh. But it is one of our requirements.
It is, yeah, it was included in the advertisement.
Mr. Veen, how would you handle this?
Arguments can be made on both sides of this one. You do need to stay firm typically with your bidding requirements. I mean, it's kind of a must, but when does an irregularity become
Irrelevant?
irrelevant?
Right.
That's the problem. I mean, the last one was a little bit easier because there was no other bidders, and you had the opportunity to have one, so you got it. I mean, that was, for me, pretty easy. This one here is more questionable.
Mr. Lieberman, did you have something to add?
Mr. Veen, if I may, we reviewed this with the city attorney's office, this specific non-inclusion affidavit form last year. We said, why are we still doing this? And the answer that came back is it's not a state requirement, it's not a local requirement, it's strictly, we've been doing it because we've been doing it. So for bids that engineering department has put out this year, we have not been including that as a requirement. This bidding process was put out by our consultant, and it kind of carried over from previous practices. So we view this as, had the engineering department been bidding this, we would not have made that a requirement and request that it be deemed an irregularity.
And if I hear you say we don't do that with the other city.
Correct.
Mr. Gosted, do you have an opinion?
The way I understand it is this, the only problem is it wasn't notarized. The fact that it's not notarized doesn't make it any less enforceable. It just means that somebody didn't necessarily witness or didn't acknowledge the signature. Since it came in the packet from that contractor, it would be really tough to argue that that wasn't my signature.
Okay. Any, Mr. Weber?
I'll move that we go ahead and open that.
Great. Is there a second? Second by Veen. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and you'll bring those back Monday?
Yep.
So you're also looking for a motion and a second for Schedule B, correct?
Yep.
Is there a motion to go with ICS, McFarland, and RBB? Moved by Veen, second by Kavami. Comments, Mr. Kavami?
So is the developer aware that the costs came back high?
I think so. Dale, do you know if that got back to him? Okay.
Okay,
Not
that's
sure.
fine.
Councilmember Kavami.
Yep.
In this case, the developer doesn't care because the city's paying for all of this, so I think we should probably care the most about it. It is a wastewater pump station. The city of Grand Forks, through our wastewater enterprise funds, pays for both the pump station and force main. So we care the most about it, but they need this in order to do anything further. So it probably should cause us, I think as part of our funding mechanism, we were looking at doing debt service on this particular project because it is, it's a 50-year asset. Or in this facility, we could use prairie dog funds that we're going to receive, but that'd be paying cash for some asset that's going to be out there for 30 plus years. But if you award this bid, we will have to come back and with some financing regarding this particular fund. So just so you know, this is a city asset, city funded asset that the city upfronts as part of our policies.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 212, engineering amendment for project 8217, sanitary lift station number 48 and force main.
Yeah, so this is the same project. So initially, when this project was brought forward in 2020, it was proposed to be an interim station on the east side of Washington. So an interim station is a temporary station essentially, and then it got changed to a permanent station. And then the development on the east side was not pursued, and it was pursued on the west side. So our consultant continued with their design and that task order. So now we need an amendment to continue on for those construction services. So staff recommends approving Amendment 1 with WFW for those construction services.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Severson. Any comments or questions? Mr. Weber?
So none of this is reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Committee, but it doesn't need to be because this has already been approved by council that we're moving forward with this project. So now we're just looking at the necessary infrastructure. Having stated the obvious, I'll go ahead and move motion for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. And second by Kwame. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Ms. Severson. Item 213, bid award for project 8357 Downtown Alley Reconstruction. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy and members of the committee of the whole. Mr. Grasser is not here, and along with Mr. Danielson, who has been working on this alley, and you know, the big projects of the pump stations are a lot, but this, working on the alley of Franklin and 4th has been a lot of moving pieces, and working with the developer and XL Energy, there's been a lot of moving parts. So this is really our pilot project of burying the underground lines as part of this development. And as you recall, this is going to be a 5-story building. They need the lines buried so that we can actually construct this building. It's going to add a lot to our community. So this particular, we are bidding this. The bids are going to come in on June 16th. And so what we're bidding is for the electrical services on the east side of the alley, and not for the development itself, but just for the east side. XL is paying to put the lines in. All the various other utilities are going to put their line in the same conduit area. But the city has proposed to pay for the electrical services for the 3 buildings that are on the east side. We did not create a special assessment district on this. We didn't see it as a benefit per se, is that they're just changing their electrical service from an above ground to below ground. So as part of this project itself, the city is paying to rehook up those 3 buildings on the east side of the development. We'll see how the bids come in on Wednesday, and hopefully they're competitive as we move forward, but it's really been a team-type process of getting all the various parties together as part of moving the project forward. So with that, we'll know more on June 16th when they are opened, and then they'll come to the city council meeting on Monday. But just so you kind of know, this is one of the first pieces. The next piece I'll talk on the next agenda item is the stormwater piece.
So all we're preliminary approving is that you'll bring it back to us on Monday next week.
We are.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank
And
you,
it is
Mr.
another, like similar to the pump station, it's the same costs.
Yep.
To move development forward.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Moved by Kavami. Is there a second by Veen? Thank you, Mr. Veen. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Now for the storm sewer, Mr. Phelan, 214, change order number 1, project 8423, 2022 storm sewer repairs.
Yeah. As part of this request, what we're asking for currently, right now, we have Taggart Construction or Contracting is currently our storm sewer repair and construction contractor. What we're asking is just to move forward with is to change over their agreement to do the storm sewer work in this particular alley. Again, this is going to be a city cost. We've determined that this improvement of the storm sewer will be a city cost, and we will not special assess these benefits. We're really just making some improvements with this alley at the same time where the electrical conduit is going in. In order to expedite, we're asking to use our existing stormwater utility contractor and change order their agreement. And then because we're change order, it is a large change order, but we're asking for our engineering department to continue to have their change order ability as part of this move forward. But this will at least get the storm sewer in this construction season along with the electrical. And then what you're going to see next year probably next year or the year after when the building is all up, then we're going to come back and ask the city to move forward with paving the alley at the conclusion of construction. So I think this is 2 out of the 3 things that we're going to do to help fund. The third thing will be come back with the paving, and then we'll have a brand-new alley adjacent to a brand-new building called Franklin on 4th. So this is the second of 3 things that we're asking to move forward with.
Mr. Phelan, in the staff recommendation, it specifically says to reset the city engineer's authority, yet I didn't see anything in the actual staff report related to resetting the city engineer's authority, so I'm curious as to what that actually means.
Yep. It says, well, the motion is to approve this change order of approximately $90,000 and reset the city engineer's authority. With this dollar amount, the city engineer's authority is 15% over the original contracted amount, which is $173,000 was the original bid. So generally what we have now is your policy is less than $500,000 bid. We have a 15% authority. Over $500,000, we have a 10% change order bid. So this would reset it to that 15%.
Okay, great. Any comments or questions? Yes, Mr. V?
The original contract, was that on a unit price basis? Or did you have to completely renegotiate line items specifically in the bid?
Yeah, I think when we did the change order, it's based upon the units, but when we bid the project, we bid specific areas to be done, but it's,
you did have line items
yes.
that you were able to use for this year, so you kept it consistent.
Yes.
Great, yep, moved by Veen, second by Kavami. Any other questions or thoughts? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Item 215, purchase of TransTrack Solutions software as a service agreement. Mr. Bergman, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy and members of the committee. What this is a TransTrack Solutions is a software as a service. They are going to combine all of the separate programs that we have into one package, so to speak, so that we can get more data that we need to have for our FTA folks. They are the only company right now that does this, and they've done it for many transit agencies, large and small, throughout the U.S. And so we are looking for approval to move ahead with this project. We have the funds, federal funds, to do this project, and we had also run it by our FTA Region 8 office, and they have given us approval to do a sole source on this particular company.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Any comments or questions or concerns? Yes, sir, Mr. Phelan, or Phelan, Mr. Weber?
I'll move approval, and then I have a question.
Mr. Weber moves approval, second by Kavami. Yes, Mr. whoever you are, Weber?
So would this replace the Cat Prowler? Does it get
No, this
that comprehensive?
has nothing to do with that. What it's doing is it's combining all of our information from our different software packages that we have, like New World, our financial program that we use for the city. It takes Excel spreadsheets that we put together that track the amount of fuel that we buy and what we buy it for and everything. It tracks our fuel system done by Syntec Fuel Master.
This is all internal, then? It's not
all internal stuff. It doesn't
interfacing
go
with the
external.
consumer at all?
And we can provide different documents for staff to, when we're doing our transportation development plan like we are right now, our NTD report, that is a miserable report that I'm still working with finance on. It's going to help us make it a much easier process for us on that.
Thanks.
Great. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Item 216, request for extension of letter of intent agreement with Northern Plains Nitrogen. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy and members of the committee hall. This evening, I'm joined by Mr. Clark Bailey, who's the new CEO of Northern Plains Nitrogen, and also the COO, Mr. Mackey, who you've seen here several times before. And so in front of you, you're used to seeing these extensions of our letter of intent, and the letter of intent is to serve them with water and wastewater reuse, and then stormwater. And we've done that several times. I think the tenor of the project has changed. Obviously, economics has changed. Supply shortages have remained the same, if not gotten worse, and obviously our geopolitics have gotten worse, and in those same areas where the geopolitics has gotten worse, that's the same place where a lot of nitrogen fertilizer supplies are the United States and the world in general. So things have changed, but it's made this project, the world has changed in many worse ways. However, it's positive for this in our area with our farmers. So with that, what I would ask is, one thing that we have worked on is, number one, is that we have worked on the airport. As you recall, this facility, unlike the Fufang site, is closer to the airport, and people always give us suggestions on where we should locate things. One of the downsides of locating things on the west side of interstate is that we're near our Grand Forks Airport, UND flight tracks, and so we have done some additional study on what this may be, the impact may be. There's going to be a new east-west runway that's going to be in place. That's going to change some of the traffic patterns. We did get an updated analysis. We did have a stakeholder meeting with all the various stakeholders from the airport, UND, NPN, the city of Grand Forks, and others. And so what we've concluded at our April meeting is that we would do some further study. And so we're going to work on some solutions, and instead of being a stop, it was more of we think we can manage this. We just got to do a little bit more study on the particulars. So we are going to move forward with that. That was good news. That was really good news. That we think there may be a way forward, but similar to all the things that we're working on with Fufang, we got to work through those details, and more to come on that, Bain, about where we're working on that. The second part of the staff report, it says, we've been on a holding pattern for several years, is that when we think that Northern Plains nitrogen is in place and ready to move forward, we'll move forward with our further due diligence. So we all know about the Fufang project and the development agreement, and some people's favorite words, due diligence, is that we anticipated Northern Plains nitrogen back in the 2015 and 16 that we would be moving forward with the development agreement. Well, a lot of time has passed, but I think what Mr. Bailey is going to come up to say is that they think the paradigm has changed. There's some increased momentum. Is that I could anticipate after this meeting and you guys approving this letter of intent to move forward, that in a similar fashion, a development agreement would be start to get designed and with similar structure to the Fufang. Obviously, this is a much larger project than Fufang. Fufang's a $700 million project. This is probably upwards of a $3 billion plus or minus project. This probably even has more regional impact than the wet corn mill, but there's really some synergies with this nitrogen fertilizer plant and corn and all the things that are going on. There are reasons why agribusiness is looking at the northern Red River Valley, is because we're an untapped resource that the world has discovered. And so, but it's a lot of money. And I think that's what Mr. Bailey's been working on, not only the due diligence, but how to attract investors to want to invest in projects like that. So number one, I'd like Mr. Bailey to introduce himself to the city council and to the community and give us kind of a highlight of where we're at and what may be coming next. So with that, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Bailey has a couple slides just to update you along the way too.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Mr. Bailey, nice to see you again. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. President, Sandy, and members of the committee. Picking up where Mr. Phelan left, the original purpose here was to ask for this extension of the agreement between the city of Grand Forks and Northern Plains Nitrogen for this wastewater. So I'll explain to you a little bit of change on that. But first of all, I'd like to take a little bit of a liberty. The current agreement will expire, even the renewal, on the 30th of June, which is only 2 weeks away. So if I could take the liberty, I'd like to move that extension to the end of the year. And that fits in with the same things that Mr. Phelan was just talking about, which I'll explain now. There's a lot of things happening in the industry right now, and this project's probably got more driving it than ever before. Yes, it's in a great location. Yes, it's a great market. Yes, there's changes in the industry with respect to supply chain, with transportation costs, with the cost of nitrogen-based chemicals or fertilizers to get into this area compared to the cost it takes on the Gulf Coast. But while we've known all that, and we've had one investor that's been working with us for 2 years, they have not done a real deep dive. They've been putting their money together. So now we've come to the point where they are ready and they want to do the deep dive, which means they want to do due diligence on the project. That means they want to look at everything. In fact, the project's so attractive now because of all the changes that are happening in the industry. We have a second, maybe even a third investor, but a second is already lined up. And because of that, over the last 2 weeks, what we did is we created a data room, because these potential investors could be a major investor, or they could be a complete purchaser of the assets. So you need a data room. You need something, a place on the internet where they can go and look at every single thing we've done, every drawing, every agreement we have in place. In that agreement, in that data room, there's going to be this package, and it's going to say the water agreement, the wastewater agreement between the city of Grand Forks and Northern Plains has expired in 2 weeks. They won't even finish their agreement, and this has already expired. So first thing I'd like to do is modify that and extend it to the end of the year. I think it's fitting with the project and where we are. It also speaks to the fact that we have 2 of these companies that are now have the money and are looking at the data room. And that data room, just to let you know, we created it in the last 2 weeks. We went over the weekend live, over the weekend as a test trial. It goes in place tomorrow with these investors. So they'll be starting to look at it tomorrow. And I'd like to have that, in that package, an updated agreement between the city of Grand Forks and Northern Plains. So at the same time, this development agreement that Mr. Phelan referenced, we do not have one. So I'd like to get something started between Northern Plains Nitrogen and the city of Grand Forks, very much like your other major project, and have a development agreement. It outlines what are the taxes, what am I paying for the wastewater. It's not outlined anywhere, and we need that in that data room. I need an agreement. It may not be in place by the time they look at that folder, but I need to be able to respond to them that a development agreement is being worked on. And when it's finished, I'll let them look at it. And in the absence of that, they could consider either one of those 2 as fatal flaws, that there is no agreement between you and the city. You have nothing developed between you and the city. You have no wastewater agreement between you and the city, and that's not right. We've been working with the city, and the city's been working with us very closely, and we appreciate all your support. So we're trying to cover off on all the things that this project's had, including the issues with the airport. We know that we're still looking for our final natural gas supply, probably from the Bakken. We're talking to pipeline companies. We talked to the pipeline authority this morning. We're talking to a pipeline company tomorrow. So we're fast forward all the things that this project needs to get finished up and to move forward. So explain to you a little bit what the project looks like. You can see basically where we physically are in your facility. Can I go on down to the plot plan? All right, we've made some changes to accommodate the airport authority. This is the current plot plan. With those changes made, we've moved our cooling towers further away from the airport. It's just at block number 4. And we've consolidated our nitric acid. We were going to have 2 nitric acid facilities, but now we've consolidated that into one, slightly larger than the first 2. The first 2 are going to be 2 800-ton units. This will be an 1,100-ton unit. But the rest of the plot plan, in terms of the ammonia plant and the urea plant, blocks 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all the same. We've made some slight adjustments to the railroad, but otherwise this is the same plan that you've looked at in the past.
That's the last.
Yeah, okay. So, any questions?
Any comments or questions for Mr. Bailey? Mr. Weber?
Sure. This project has some similarities to Fufang in that it would be one more way for our community to support the important ag industry in our region.
Absolutely.
In fact, this was important 7, 8 years ago. Mr. Mackey, you've been coming here for a while now. And as you've said multiple times, it's even more important now.
Yeah. Fertilizer in this region pays a premium to farmers say on the Gulf Coast who have access to deep water ammonia and deep water nitrogen products. That's all associated with the extra transportation cost to get up here and the fact that you're locked in. And a project of this size right in the middle of this marketplace will be an advantage and help the farming community and agriculture community in this area.
Clearly, it doesn't just support our ag industry, it also has a great synergy with the energy industry in this state.
We're a big consumer. The pipelines that are being proposed, we would, depending on what the final size is that they're going to bring in, we would be as much as maybe over half of the capacity on that pipeline.
Currently, all the money, I don't know, currently the vast majority of money spent by ag industry in this region goes to the Gulf region or even the Middle East, where those products come from, and we're the end user, which means a very difficult supply predictability for users in this region, right?
That's true. And with the current conflict in Europe, this reliability of supply from out of the Baltic or the Black Sea in particular is going to be less reliable. Not to mention that you're not going to be buying Russian ammonia anymore. There used to be a large trade agreement between Nitrochem, which is an old Arm & Hammer agreement. There's a swap of phosphates and nitrogen that came out of Yuzhny. That's gone. You're not going to get that ammonia out of Tiliazot any longer. You won't get products out of Tuapse anymore. Depending on what happens in the latest sanctions that came out earlier this week against the Melanchenkos for Lifosa, you may not get the phosphate materials out of even Lithuania because it's related to the ownership of a Russian. So yes, the United States is very much in jeopardy right now compared to what they were a year ago.
These benefits come with some costs as well. This would be a game changer for our community in the same way that Fufeng would. We would become, to some degree, a chemical producing community, but in great support for ag industry. And part of the reason for my support for the Fufeng project is that over the last 8 years, we have been looking at this project on an annual basis, even more regularly, and we've come to understand the fantastic benefit of having a project like this in our community, and a project that's, more than 4 times probably the size of the Fufeng plant. Based upon what we've been discussing for the last 8 years, I was hesitant about this project, maybe to some degree early on, but I've come to understand its tremendous benefit for ag industry in the region and for our community directly. With that, I will move approval for the extension till the end of '22. But then I'd also like to have a discussion, and maybe now is the right time, I don't know. This is such a huge project, even bigger than Fufeng. And we have a part-time city council, a part-time mayor, and our ability, our skill set to deal with the project of this size is intimidating to many degrees. So I'd like to have, perhaps we could have that discussion as well, how we go through the process of doing our due diligence on a project this size. But for now, I'll just move approval of the extension till the end of '22.
And the development agreement?
We're going to work the extension first.
Okay, sorry.
So, no, it's no problem. There's a motion. Is there a second to extend the water? Mr. Dean?
I'll make the motion, but I've got comments.
Okay, so you're seconding Mr.
Yes.
Weber's? And then, yes, okay, so there's a motion and a second. Mr. Bean, comments?
Okay, I'd like to just add a couple more. I mean, Mr. Mackey, you've been here for years, and we've been very supportive of the project. What I liked a lot about it is the water, much of it, I don't know if it changed, but we were using 100% of our wastewater.
That's correct.
That was, to me, a key feature for how we could move this forward. You did need to get potable water for, in addition. So I don't think we want to have this discussion here and now, but I think before it moves forward, we have to talk about the water issue and how we do that. in conjunction with how we're working with Paving. And that's not I mean, these are two different things, but we've got to address that availability, and what I'm going to say is the responsibility of the state to come forward with some solutions for us as we move forward. I think it's there. I'm glad to see that you're working on the energy and some of the other pieces that are coming into this. It's got to be wholehearted. We've got to look at the whole thing, and I think, like Mr. Weber said, we've learned a lot from, again, what we did at Paving. It is a very complex project. It has so many different pieces and features to it and how it impacts and all of that. I just want to make sure we do diligence on how we move this forward. And I was going to talk a little bit later about how we develop some type of process where I'd like to see the council involved in moving it forward. Some of my concerns is we seem to be very reactive. When something comes forward, there's so much going on. Like the next topic here, we get whatever 5 or 8 attachments to it that we move forward. It's really hard, as Mr. Weber had said, for a part-time council to be on top of all of this, and somehow I think we need to revisit our process to see how we have the right level of involvement, the right level of consent building as you move major projects through. And I think we can collaboratively do that. But it takes an effort for us to be able to do that and look at that process. You know, like, and so anyway, this is the first step of that. Again, the water issue, I really thought made a lot of sense for you, for what's going on here.
Well, we're very willing to work with the city on all those. Perhaps if I can volunteer that some of those points that you made about potable water, how much cost, would all be put as part of the development agreement?
Yes, right. Okay. We understand.
But the nice thing would be, we know enough about development agreements to not just react to it, but be a part of the development of it.
But that's outside of what we're talking about with Mr. Bailey. You're talking in general for future projects being included in the process.
And he's looking for a development.
Yes. And
he's looking for a development.
He is. I understand that. I'm trying to get a motion in a second to get the water and then have a discussion on, which we have a motion in a second. Why don't we move that, and then we can have a discussion about the development agreement. How does that sound? So there's a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions related to the water?
Yeah, I want to go back to the motion because I do have, I think supporting to move the project forward is not necessarily my endorsement that there's enough water. We've got to work that issue through. But I do want to see the project move forward and not, and to continue that. So I want to make sure everybody understands why I seconded and what my efforts are.
Sure.
Council President, if I could just run the numbers. So the current letter of...
Can we just get a vote on the letter of intent?
I just want to go through the numbers. The current letter of intent says 6.8 million gallons per day of wastewater reuse, okay? Sure. 0.9 MGD of, we'll call it potable water, okay? Right now, because time has passed, we have 1 million gallons more from East Grand Forks. So we probably, when we really get to a final agreement, we're going to have enough wastewater reuse to supply all of their industry supply, and they'll have to have fire protection, potable water, they'll have to have drinking water. But just so you know now, this project would be a huge net gain because instead of discharging water to the wastewater, they would consume a lot of it. Obviously, some of it would obviously be returned in a higher strength that we'd still have to discharge. But that's really the positives of integrating East Grand Forks. And as you know, Mr. Sandy, that's been integrated in there. So if there's any benefit from wastewater reuse, East Grand Forks will also share in some benefits since we're treating their wastewater too. So right now, we would probably end up modifying this letter of intent if we got to a final development agreement. And even this letter of intent would be, and the letter of intent just basically says we reserve these amounts, but everything is subject to some sort of final agreement, which would entail the development agreement. And in this case, I know there was some heartburn about why didn't we know about the project? Well, we've all known about the project for 8 years now. And so now as we move forward with the development agreement, we should be pretty well schooled on what you may or may not want in a development agreement. And your input will be very much welcomed as part of this. And again, it's a $3 billion project, and I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to comprehend what that investment means in Grand Forks, and it's obviously game-changing, much more than the Fufang project.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. So regarding the letter of intent, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions related to the letter of intent for the water? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Great, motion carries unanimously. So, Mr. Phelan, is it your intention, do you want us to move that we come up with a development agreement, or are you and the mayor going to be working with our city attorney to put something on paper?
We will. And what I just wanted to let you know is that they have a critical couple weeks here that I would anticipate, if everything went well, that we would be back here in front of you saying we want to go the next step of a development, and I didn't want you to surprise. I wanted to really notate, number one, Clark is here for a reason, and number two, it's not a perfunctory, let's extend it for 6 months as part of kind of an academic exercise. But we'll come back, hopefully within the next 2 to 4 weeks, to have some good news that we're going to move forward with the next step of development.
Because the development agreement, it didn't just magically appear for Fufang. It took a significant amount of our city attorney's time. So are we just going to develop the outline for it? Which to me, I think you develop the bullets and things that we agree on, and we can sign that. Putting together that entire agreement for something like this, we don't know what we don't know. I mean, this could be months and months and months of work. So how do you suggest we solve his problem without hiring 4 more attorneys to get it done?
I think what they'll have to do is they'll have to, right now, NPN will have to update some of their existing permits, and they'll have to do some additional work to really dust off some things. So while they do that, similar to what Fufang is doing, we're going to have to start moving forward with our infrastructure. Like, for example, when we were back here, we have estimates on how we're going to serve the facility. We'll have to update those. We estimate about $50 million to support the infrastructure development in this area. We'll have to update those things, and there'll be some updates we'll do, and that'll all go into a development agreement, which, heck, if Fufang was announced in November and we had done some work before that, just to ensure that we could serve it, we can serve this facility. It's just going to take time and effort and investment. And if we got a development agreement by the end of February, I think it's a 3 to 4 month process as part of this project too.
Okay, so you just want a nod of heads, yep, we're moving forward, and let's put some time and effort into.
Yep. Council President, I think what Mr. Clark Bailey wants in Northern Plains Nitrogen, they want to be able to demonstrate to potential investors that this community is not only behind this letter of intent, but they're behind doing further due diligence and working through a development agreement. And this is a community that will support this industry, but in a very careful and thoughtful way, and that we're still with them, and they want to be able to communicate that to investors.
It'll be a question asked, and we need to be able to answer that question.
So, Mr. Phelan, do you want us to move that we do a development agreement, or are you guys, you're informing us that you're going to do it?
Yep, and what I'm hearing from the city council is that you are supportive, and let's move forward to the next steps. And at a future meeting, we'll kind of go through the framework to get your input up front as part of a development process.
Yes, Mr. Weber?
So if you're looking for some assent of support, let me say that this is fantastic news. This is great news that we're even having this discussion. The Fufang plant has already strained our city's capacity, and this is a project that would be 4 times that size. Now, we've been working on it for 8 years, so it's not coming to us as fresh, and the Fufang experience, I'm guessing, has given us some muscle to move towards something like this. But again, for a part-time mayor and part-time council, this strains our capacity, and along with assent for support for moving towards a development agreement, I would like for us to continue to have conversations about how we take on so much more work, because the amount of material we receive kind of on a weekly basis to try to consume, and the technical expertise required of that is about, would expand, if not exponentially, at least fourfold. Fourfold feels exponential to me at this point. So that would be my statement of qualified support.
Mr. Veen?
I was just going to say, if you look at all this has happened, the number of construction jobs that this is going to create at this time is going to be significant. It'll be huge, and just the awareness of that's going to come. But we talked about that before with this job. We knew that was what was going to take. Even when we were talking about Fufang, I asked the question, how does this impact northern nitrogen? Because you've been at the table for a long time. And again, the wastewater issue was something that was always appealing.
In fact, there could be multiple synergies here that could be really fantastically beneficial. But geez.
Actually, one of our local farmers who's been adamantly against Fufang told me that if Fufang moves forward, we really have to figure out how to get Northern Plains nitrogen.
Absolutely.
So I think, yes, let's move forward and put pencil to paper and start working on the development agreement. And thank you, Mr. Bailey, for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And Mr. Mackey, always nice to see you. Excellent. Good discussion, everyone. Last but not least, item 217, letter of credit for Fufang USA. Mr. Guster.
Yep, I'll go through you've been provided the letter of credit. I'll just kind of give you a little bit of background and explain a little bit. As you know, in the development agreement, there was a letter of credit that was required to be provided by Fufang. It was a $5 million amount under the letter of credit. It's to be issued annually and can be renewed. That's part of the provisions in the letter, or in the development agreement. The renewal can't be done so that it limits or otherwise changes the obligation of the bank to the city. So you have an annual renewal, but that renewal doesn't change the terms of the letter of credit. Under the development agreement, the qualifications for the financial institution, it had to be subject to U.S. banking laws. It had to have an A- or higher Standards & Poor's rating and an A3 or higher in a Moody's Investors rating. Just so you know, those rating criteria were not just by accident. If you recall, the One Oak is putting in the pipeline from Minnesota to North Dakota. And part of that project, Fufang is paying for part of that project, and One Oak is requiring a letter of credit as well for their work, and those ratings are consistent with One Oak is requesting for their letter of credit as well. Just to give you a little bit of background, I know we've talked about this before, but the letter of credit remains in effect until both of these two items are met per the development agreement. The plant has to be what's called substantially completed, and the developer has paid costs and expenses that are incurred before an assessment district is set up. So there are certain costs that would otherwise be allocated to a special assessment district, but because the district may not be set up, those expenses, you couldn't specially assess them. So Fufang has to pay that proportionate amount. Substantially completed means that their plant is completed to the point where it can be utilized for its intended purposes, and that the plant is in operation and is producing saleable product. Substantially completed is determined by the city engineer, city planner, city inspector, city fire code official, city waterworks director, and the city administrator all have to sign off on when that plant is substantially completed. So that's how long the letter of credit needs to remain in effect. The letter of credit is to be issued per the development agreement 5 calendar days after the form and terms of it have been approved by my office. The letter of credit can be drawn upon if the agreement is terminated, whether the city terminates it because the conditions haven't been satisfied, or Fufang terminates it because their conditions haven't been satisfied, or if there's been a default by Fufang, we can draw on the letter of credit. Basically, we send something to the financial institution requesting payment under the terms of the letter of credit, up to the $5 million amount. those items that are covered by the letter of credit per the development agreement are consulting costs. Those costs that we're incurring to assist in our review, those are estimated right now at about $1.6 million. Those pre-assessment costs we talked about, that's estimated to be about $600,000. If there is, and if you recall, if there are some certain preliminary infrastructure that's Fufang asks City Council to install before the conditions are satisfied, those would be covered. If you recall, those conditions, those type of infrastructure have to come before the City Council to get approved before they'd even be done. The cost of drafting infrastructure plans and review of those Grand Forks of Fufang plant plans that aren't otherwise covered by the consulting cost. Most of those are going to be covered by the consulting cost, but if there's something that may not be, those are covered by the $3 million or $5 million letter of credit. If there's any refunds that need to be made, and specifically, if you recall, county has dedicated $3 million of their ARPA funds. If, for example, the project doesn't go forward, the county may request those ARPA funds back. The letter of credit is intended to cover those as well. And then standard cost to remove access to water and water services, which would be nominal in relationship to the other items. As far as the terms of this particular letter of credit, what I did is did some research and obtained other letter of credit documents that either the city has accepted with respect to some developments that have occurred before, where a developer had to put up a letter of credit, and also outside of the city of Grand Forks, some letter of credit forms that have been accepted or provided by other financial institutions. You'll notice in the letter of credit document itself, there are items that are green in color. Those are things that still need to be inserted, like the bank's letter of credit number, the date it's issued, and that date is important because that will then trigger the renewal date as well. The parties to the letter of credit is MUFG Bank Limited is the issuer. That's the financial institution, the bank. The applicant is Fufang. So they applied or have to apply to this financial institution for their letter of credit, and then we're the beneficiary of it. The bank, MUFG Bank Limited, does meet the criteria that are set forth in the development agreement. It is subject to U.S. banking laws. We received a communication from Dorsey and Whitney, email communication advising that they would and are subject to our U.S. banking laws. We also then went out and obtained independent information about their ratings. There's an email from Mike Vattenzahl, who received communication from Piper and Sandler about their rating. Moody's, they're at A1, and the S&P, they're at an A and an A- for their holding company, so they meet the criteria set forth in the development agreement. This information, MUFG also provided us information as to what their ratings are, and what we got from Piper and Sandler is consistent. Actually, is consistent with what MUFG provided to us as well. So we got it from the bank and also from an independent source. The letter of credit also sets forth that they make a representation to the city that they meet all these criteria. A little bit about some of the terms. Paragraph on pages 1 and 2 of the document, it describes what's needed to make a demand. Pretty standard. When we'd make a demand, if there is an event of default, we have to provide the notice of default. Or if there is a termination, we have to provide also a copy of the termination. So there's certain terms or language we have to make when we send in the demand, and then indicate to them that this is why we're making the demand. Either there's been a termination or there's been a default. You'll also see on the second paragraph of page 3, there's an automatic renewal. I may have outsmarted myself a little bit. There's going to be a change to that one because it says that it expires at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on a particular date in 2023. It'll be a year after it's the date of the letter of credit. And then it goes on to say it would automatically renew at 4:59 p.m. every year. And so the change is going to read that it will simultaneously renew at 5 p.m. so that there's absolutely no time differential between when it expires and when it automatically renews. And it continually renews until we tell the bank that the Grand Forks plant has been substantially completed and those funds have been paid. So it's up to us to end the letter of credit. Some additional terms that I've included, I wanted to make sure that this was solely an obligation to the bank. It's not dependent upon them obtaining any liens or security interests or collateral from Fufang to secure up this letter of credit. Remember, if we tap into the letter of credit, I would expect the bank would seek repayment from Fufang. Our letter of credit doesn't matter what their rights or remedies are against Fufang. Doesn't matter what might happen to Fufang if, for example, they tip into bankruptcy. That it doesn't matter. This is an obligation between the bank and the city. Any fees relating to this letter of credit are payable by Fufang only. We can make electronic presentation, fax, and/or email, more likely be email communication. As long as our presentation substantially conforms with what is specified in the letter of credit, they have 7 business days to pay out on the letter of credit. And also that North Dakota law will apply, and that any action that may need to be brought by the city to collect on this would be brought here in North Dakota, in a North Dakota court by a judge only, not by a jury. So that kind of summarizes the letter of credit. Again, it's part of the development agreement, and it's intended to provide security with respect to the costs and expenses the city is incurring.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Gusted. Are there any questions about the letter of credit or any of the additional information? Mr. Veen? Yes, sir?
Yeah, a couple things. I think the thing the letter of credit does, correct me, is it helps to manage the city's risks. I mean, one of the big issues we have, which I think in all that we're doing, and you've done some of that, is looking at risk and management risk. How do you mitigate risk, right?
Correct.
This is a significant feature to mitigate or manage risk. Is that right?
It's to mitigate the financial risk to the city incurring, because we've had to hire consultants because of the size of this type of project. It does require expertise to come in and provide that oversight. That's not, those costs are being incurred. And so if, for example, the agreement is terminated and the plant doesn't go forward, the city will still have incurred those costs, and we can recover those costs through the letter of credit.
So the second part of that is, what's the authority that the city has? How do we go about collecting, and what's our rights to collect?
It's specified in the letter of credit.
Yep.
I would refer you to page 1 and 2. We send in what's called the site draft, signed by the mayor, the beneficiary, and it states this is what needs to be in the site draft. Top of page 2, there's paragraphs A and B. It describes what we have to provide with the letter of credit. This language, we would cut and paste this language in a letter to the bank, and then we would tell them we're seeking the demand because either there's been a default or a termination, and then we provide them either the default notice or the termination notice.
Yeah, and I guess what I want to make sure, it's nice to have it, but the practicality and the ability to actually collect on it and is one of the questions. I guess that's why I was asking that. Oftentimes you have insurance, for instance, and then you turn to collect on your insurance and you got to sue them to get the money. What's our ability to make sure if we have a claim, we'll be able to collect?
And that's the reason why we had the ratings, so that we assured that we had a financial institution that had a certain rating level that they had the ability to pay. Second is we've got remedy provisions that allow us to bring the action. If we had to sue it out, we'll have to bring the action here in North Dakota.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Veen. Any other comments or questions, thoughts? Yeah, this is great news. They more than met our requirements, and with a very large financial institution that has the qualifications that we're looking for, so that's great. Any other comments for the good of the order? Is there a motion to adjourn?
If I can, one is time is of essence, having to do it. I have some information to report back to you that has a timeline on it. I think it might
We,
be interesting.
happy to visit with you after we adjourn.
Oh,
Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Jochler. I'm sorry. The staff report didn't ask us to approve it. I thought we just got it. Will you actually want us to approve it? Is there a motion to approve the letter of credit? Moved by Kavami. Is there a second? Yep, second by Weber. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Dockler dissents. Is there a motion to adjourn? By Weber, second by Dockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Come on up.
okay.